Welcome to the Continuous Improver podcast. Today I am joined by my good friend Alex. So, Alex and I have worked together for a few years now on the board of a space company, which has been very scrappy, very fun. And Alex is also the CEO of Navi Medical Technologies. Welcome, Alex. It might be good if you can give a quick overview, actually, of what you're doing at Navi. What's the problem and product you're working on?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Andy. It's nice to be here. So Navi Medical Technologies is building a medical device that helps doctors and nurses improve care for critically ill newborns and children
Mm,
in the ICU setting. Um, One of the most frequent procedures that newborn babies or sick kids get is the placement of a central catheter, but there's a problem with the lack of real time data on actually where the tip of that catheter goes. So we're
yeah,
developing a medical device that gives people the data they need when they need it.
yeah, that's awesome. I think you guys are doing a really good job. Awesome team as well.
Thank you.
And and I suppose what we're kind of diving into with this whole podcast is approaches to continuous improvement, however you might define that. I think this is
Mhm.
something you guys naturally are really good at with your team. But I wanted to start with, from your perspective as a CEO, how do you actually approach thinking about the culture side of how do we ensure that we're constantly improving as a team and just go from there?
I think we haven't really had a choice, and the reason
Mm,
for that is that we're a first time founding team.
yeah,
None of us have had a lot of experience in medical devices. Some of our team has had experience in industries other than medical devices. So I came
yeah,
from an engineering background, but more mechanical and aerospace. um,
yeah,
a lot of our team have basically not really worked in industry before, so this is their first job. So
yeah.
when you're faced with that sort of prospect of being fairly fresh in a new industry, you have to
Mm,
be a continuous improver, right? You don't
yeah,
have any deep background or experience that you can rely on. So part of it, I think, is just that we are always having to learn and improve just to stay
yeah,
alive. But
yeah,
then there's aspects that we do um, control and implement with more um, intent, I suppose.
mm,
There's lots of aspects of our business where we're constantly learning and feeding information back, making sure that we're really closing the loops so that we can continuously improve. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
I I have a couple questions about that. One, which I think it's an interesting observation from knowing you for quite a while, is probably the importance of humility, not just of yourself, but your co-founders as well. And I think that's plays into exactly what you just said, because I know a lot of startups who are in a similar position experience wise, but perhaps have the hubris to think that we don't need to do this. We know what we're doing. I'd love to hear your perspective on the either the role, if you do think it plays a role, but of actually having the humility to be able to accept we need to improve. In your case, to survive, it sounds like as a startup.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I think it's all about finding the right balance. You
Mm,
definitely need people who are confident in what they're doing
mm,
and that have the belief in
yeah.
what they're doing. But in our case, you really have to temper that with the ability to take feedback on board.
Mm,
One of the things that you learn in all of the accelerator programs is that you have to be a coachable team, and
yeah.
coachable teams are the ones that do well. Um, so you do have to learn how to take feedback, and sometimes that feedback can be really hard to hear, but you've got to take it on board. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think we've been fortunate in that our founding team, we all fit together really well, and I think one of the
Yeah.
characteristics that we share is that we don't really have big egos, and so that helps
Mm,
us take that feedback on board while still kind of keeping that confidence and self belief that we can do something that nobody's ever done before.
mm. Have you had to do, or have you consciously done anything to try deliberately create that environment where you maintain your humility, particularly as you get wins on the board, is when maybe you see ego starts to build, which you guys have had quite a few of. Um, have you done anything consciously as a team to try and maintain those core values or culture?
Yeah, we're always working on the culture, and we try to keep that quite explicit. We'll meet
Mm,
a few times a year and talk about what sort of business are we trying to build, and what sort of culture are
mm,
we trying to establish. So that's certainly something that we try to keep in the front of our mind, and that will
yeah.
become more and more important as our team grows. Our team has already started to grow. So
Yeah.
we've had some experience in how do you bring people into that kind of culture, because it can be
Yep.
daunting, because we had six
Mm,
co-founders that were all very, very tight knit and had worked together for several
mm-hmm.
years, and then we started to bring some
Mm-hmm.
people into the company, and we really took care in how we did that,
Yeah.
because we thought, okay, this is something that's it's really important, and it can be a real challenge.
Yep.
So we're explicit about the culture, and
Give an example of that. What do you mean in a tangible way for people, and how is it used?
we sit down and we talk about what is it that we're building, not just the product, but what is the company
Yeah.
that we're building, and
Yeah.
what sort of company do we want to be, and what sort of values do we actually value,
Mm.
and are
Mm-hmm.
we actually behaving in those values, or are there
Yeah.
areas that we say that we want to have a certain value, but then we're not actually delivering
Yeah.
on that, and so we can I think the good thing with our team is that we can be very honest with each other, and have those
Mm.
conversations. So that's definitely a big strength, is actually just being able to have those conversations, and I think just
Yeah.
having just talking about the culture helps, because it
Mm.
brings people's attention back to the fact that, oh yeah, there's this other entity here. It's not just
Yeah.
a bunch of bums on seats doing work. There's this other entity that everyone is um, putting ingredients into to kind of make this culture.
Yeah. It's really interesting. And uh, a question I have, particularly because you guys have raised money, and so there's always now going to be some demand to deliver on your whatever targets you've set, is around prioritization. So often I see a massive challenge. To be fair, that's not even startup world, that's every organization on
Mhm.
prioritizing actually getting better, making the time to do it because it's easy to give, lip service to we value it versus doing it. Is there How do you guys approach that challenge of making sure people are taking the time to improve?
Yeah, that is a challenge, because the busier you get, the first thing that it's easy to cut is that
Mm,
kind of professional development. So look, that's something that we struggle with. I think, like a lot of
yeah.
startups. Um, Over the last couple of years, there has been some times where the work has not been quite as intense and busy for
Yeah.
COVID reasons, and we
Yeah.
took that opportunity to do some professional development courses.
Cool.
We
Yeah.
encourage everyone to keep sort of learning about areas that they're interested in. So, for example, some people are doing AI courses, some people are doing
Yeah.
project management courses. So that's all happening fairly organically. One thing
Mm,
that we will have to do, and that we recognize, is that we'll have to, and as the team grows, we'll have to implement some processes that are a little more structured around professional
yep.
development. Um, but it is a real challenge for a small startup. When you've only got 6 or 7 people,
Mm,
having somebody out, at regular intervals to do some courses, or something, you really notice it, right? One of the things in a
yeah.
startup is there's nowhere to hide in a startup. If somebody's not pulling their weight, you notice it
Yeah.
immediately. So
Yeah.
it's not like a big organization where you can have sort of a team, take off a day to do a leadership course,
Yeah.
and there's no effect on the business. It's not like that at all in a
Mm.
startup.
Well, have you tried to resolve that, or have you made an approach which is more focused on, I guess, micro improvements in light of the fact that you can't have people taking off? as much time in a given week.
Yeah, I mean, we build in lots and lots of opportunities for small loops or small iterations and feeding
Yeah.
and feedback loops. That it's interesting because we're in an industry that's very traditionally very waterfall project management methodology
Yeah.
driven.
Yep.
Medical devices is not like building an app. You can't release a
Mm.
medical device that's half baked and expect your users to provide you feedback to fix it.
Yeah.
And there's reasons for that, and the reasons are risk.
Mm.
There's a big regulatory body, either the TGA in Australia or the FDA in the US. Big regulatory
Yep.
bodies that say no, your device has to meet really high standards for safety and
Hmm.
quality, and
Mm.
they're really hard bars to hurdle. So
Yeah.
you can't sort of take a half-baked medical device to the FDA. So we're in an industry that's very traditionally waterfall driven. So it's not easy for us to get a lot of feedback um, like other industries. But what we can
Yeah.
do is build in little opportunities kind of every day. And so we have things like um, in our engineering meetings once a week, we'll take 10 minutes at the end just to reflect, to think
Mm.
about how did the meeting go? Did we stay on track? Were we focused?
Hmm.
Are there any areas that we can do better for next time? And
Yep.
we tend to give ourselves a score out of 10, and it's a little bit of an opportunity just to see how people were feeling in the meeting as well. And
Yep.
we've noticed over time a really steady, gradual improvement, and that's good to see. Um, Other things are like we run a journal club. I think it's once every fortnight,
Yep.
where somebody will pick a paper and they'll read it and pull it apart and then feed that information back to the rest of the team. And that's an
That's cool.
awesome
Yeah.
opportunity to spark discussion and
Yeah.
ideas come out of it. And that's one of the most interesting parts of my week. I love the journal club things.
I love it.
Um, then there's other things that happen a little bit less sort of frequently, like at the end of every major engineering project, or when we finish an engagement with a vendor, we'll actually
Mm.
sit back and think about how that engagement went. Was there what went well, what sucked, and what are the
Yeah.
opportunities that we can improve, and sometimes what are the opportunities that we can feed back to the people that we worked with
Yeah.
to improve. And that's been really good. We've actually been able to learn a lot internally and feedback on a couple of occasions, feedback from some information to vendors that has been really
Yeah.
helpful. So even in an industry like medical devices, where I think most people would think that there's not, it's difficult to take an agile approach. I think just in the day to day work, you can build in lots of little opportunities to improve.
Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting, because that's actually, when you consider it, quite a few different initiatives you've got going. Some for knowledge share and learning. Something that interests me actually is the fact that you let people learn whatever they're interested in,
Hmm.
which kind of encourages diverse learning as well. Is there someone responsible? How have you approached actually making sure these things get followed through on? Because again, these are all great initiatives, which I often hear people talk about, but it doesn't get followed through. Like the post mortem, we finished a
Hmm.
project and actually taking the time to reflect and prioritizing it versus jumping onto the next thing. You're obviously doing it naturally, and you might not have made it so formalized. But is there something you think that has led to it being successfully followed and adopted in your team?
I think it's just the nature of our team members. So,
Yeah.
when we were fortunate when we met that we all really liked working together, and I mentioned that
Mm.
one of that we've got a number of common traits, and one of them is just that we like learning. I think
Mm.
everyone in our team likes
Hmm.
learning, and
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes it can be a bit of a drag to sit down after a fairly long engineering process and then dissect it and sort of see what
Yeah.
worked and what didn't. But everybody understands the value in that. There's like of that. I'm absolutely convinced. Everyone sees the
Yeah.
value in it. Um, so it's not hard when you get the right people. It's not hard I
Mm.
definitely don't feel like I have to whip people to get them to,
Yeah.
do this sort of thing, and often it's not even me driving it. It's other people in
Yep.
the team saying, "Hey, let's sit down and reflect." So, I think that's a really good culture to sort of have, where
Yeah.
people have the sense of autonomy and sort of, and maybe that's not the right word, but the sense of ownership to
Yep.
do it themselves.
Yep. No, I think that's awesome. And I guess it makes sense as the leaders when you're all learners yourselves and people who naturally are doing this, then it is going to spread to the team, at least in the short term growth stage.
Yeah.
My final, I suppose, question would be around: are there any tools you guys through the years have found most effective for actually identifying, what problems we're having or improvements to make and executing them?
Um, we A little while ago, we adopted a tool, a framework that's been quite helpful. So there was
Mm,
a book that our team read called EOS, or the Entrepreneurial Operating System,
mm,
which is, it's a really good sort of sensible. I mean, a lot of it's just common sense, but when it's kind of written down, you kind of think, oh yeah, of
yeah.
course, that makes sense. So
Yep.
we all read that, and we had a discussion about, how would we like to implement that, or something similar to that in our company,
Mm,
because um, we're not a big company. We're a very small company, and we're pre-revenue.
yeah.
So there were some parts of the book that just required a little bit of a tweak, but essentially we
Mm.
implemented something along those lines, and it's worked out really well.
What is
So,
it? What is the actual system? Sorry.
so the EOS it's a number of processes that fit together. I think it's six, seven,
Right.
something like that. And there are different parts of the system that all cover different areas. So,
Yeah.
how do you do your big quarterly planning process,
Cool.
and
Cool.
then
Cool.
how do you
Yeah.
run your your weekly meetings?
Mm.
How do you think about structuring your team, and then how do you keep
Yeah.
people in that team accountable to each other?
Yep.
And so everything kind of fits together. That's the one thing about the book that I really liked, is how
That's
everything kind of
nice.
fit together like a puzzle. um, and so we've really adopted something very similar to that. Like I said, basically stock, but with a few tweaks, and
Yeah.
that's worked out really well. I would
That sounds
recommend
good.
people have a look at that. So so that's one thing. The other thing is just flowing information through the team on a really regular basis.
Yeah.
So we have
Yeah.
at least an hour set aside every week just for
Mm.
like a chat, really, like a
Hmm.
team chat,
Yep.
where there's a bit of a structure, but it's pretty loose, and we're not actually trying to, you know make huge decisions. Usually it's more just to
Mm.
bring people up to speed, and the reason for that is we had a founding team of six, and for a long time we had three full-time founders and three part-time founders. And so we
Hmm. Hmm.
we identified that one of the risks is that the full-time founders are moving at a much quicker pace, and
Yeah.
to make decisions effectively, you have to be able to bring other people along, and to do that, you
Yeah.
have to share that information. And so, it's a really good meeting where we can run through different aspects of our business. Like, we break our business up into basically four quadrants, and
Mm.
we just have a discussion about what's been going on in the last week in each of those areas. And it's more just to educate people, make sure everyone has a really good base level
Hmm.
knowledge about what's going on in every
What
part
are,
of the business.
what are the four quadrants you use out of curiosity?
So we've got a product development quadrant where we talk about
Yeah.
hardware and software engineering, that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. Then we have a clinical research quadrant where we talk about
Yeah.
benchtop research, clinical research, animal studies, stuff like that. Then we've got a regs
Mm.
and reimbursement, and IP quadrant, so kind of the
Yeah.
areas where we talk about FDA, or provisional patents here, or we
Mm.
need to do a health economic study. And then there's the last one is actually about the company itself, and so that's looking at the team, what sort of
Yeah.
engagement we had with. you know, stakeholders, or somebody did a really good LinkedIn
Yeah.
post and there was somebody really interesting who engaged with it, and governance as well. So talking about
Yeah.
board meetings and what are the things that we need to do to make sure that our company is actually healthy. So
Mm.
broadly, those are the four areas, and yeah, that's worked really well.
I really like that actually. I think
Mm.
it's quite interesting because also as a startup, I'm sure there are risks which you might be scared about sharing with the entire team. Um, for natural leadership reasons, you want to, as the leader, make sure you're looking competent, etc. But that transparency probably upskills, no doubt. And it's
Mhm.
what does that kind of T-shaped, if you've seen the T-shaped person before,
Yeah, yeah,
where it's the broad skill set but deep
yeah.
in whatever they're doing, which I think is amazing. But also, I imagine it drives ownership, where you talk about a risk or some problem on the company level, and someone who's not related to that specific issue might go, "Hey, I've got an idea. Can we do X?"
Absolutely. Yeah, there's
Um,
there's there's people who report in different areas, but everyone is
yeah,
able to discuss and
yeah,
have some influence over the decisions that are made. And it's pretty incredible because when I look at my sort of business side co-founders, Brad and Way,
yeah.
they've been intimately involved in discussions about FDA, registration. And
Hmm.
Christiane, who's our chief medical officer, she's frequently really engaged in the commercial conversations. And so you get
Yeah,
this, you do get this great T people sort of
yeah,
effect flowing out of it. So people who are very strong in one discipline are really engaged and educated about everything that's going on. It's really cool.
yeah. I think that's awesome. Um, you guys are killing it. Great team. Thanks, Alex. We'll cut it there just to keep it short enough for people.
Pleasure.
But appreciate your time.
Thanks.